I was old, tired. The world had worn me down, and my own children. The ones I had raised with love and sacrifice saw not a father, but an opportunity. They brought me to a quiet home, a place with soft-spoken nurses and sterile hallways. They promised it was for my care, for my own good. Their smiles were wide, their hugs a little too tight, as they guided my hand to sign the papers. Were leaving me behind, leaving me with nothing but faded photographs and the deafening silence of my memories. They wanted my house, the home I had built, the walls that held the echoes of their childhood laughter. And just like that, they were gone. The first few weeks were a blur of loneliness. Day bled into the next, a monotonous cycle of scheduled meals and quiet afternoons spent staring out the window. The silence was my constant companion, a heavy blanket that threatened to suffocate me. I saw other residents, faces etched with similar stories of abandonment and loss. We were the forgotten ones, the remnants of lives lived, now tucked away and out of sight. My spirit felt as withered as my body. The hope I once held, the belief in family and loyalty, had crumbled into dust. I was just another old man waiting for the end. But in that place of endings, something unexpected began. It started with a conversation. A quiet man named Arthur, who had been a stockbroker in his younger years. He saw the flicker of life that still remained in my eyes, buried beneath layers of despair. He started teaching me, sharing his knowledge of the markets, of discipline, of patience. Another resident, a retired professor, would engage me in debates, sharpening my mind, pushing me to think beyond the four walls of my room. It was like waking from a long, deep sleep. I started to read, to learn, to study. I found a purpose that had nothing to do with my past and everything to do with my future. I took my small pension, the little bit of money my children hadn't been able to touch, and I started to invest. It began with tiny, cautious steps. I applied the discipline Arthur taught me. The critical thinking the professor had reawakened. I spent my nights poring over charts and financial news. Not for the sake of getting rich, but for the challenge, for the feeling of control. My small risks, guided by newfound knowledge, started to pay off. $100 became $200. 1,000 became 5. The numbers on the screen were more than just money. They were a measure of my rebirth. They were proof that I was still here, that my mind was still sharp, that I was not finished. Years slipped by. The passage of time was no longer a countdown to the inevitable, but a period of growth. My posture straightened. The fog in my mind cleared. The small wins in the market accumulated, compounding not just my wealth, but my confidence. I was no longer the frail, heartbroken man who had been left to wither away. I was someone new, someone forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by knowledge and discipline. The staff at the home started to notice the change. They saw a man with a spark in his eye, a purpose in his stride. I was no longer just a resident. I was a student, a strategist, a silent victor. The wealth I accumulated was substantial, far beyond anything I could have imagined. It was enough to buy my freedom, and so much more. One morning, I packed a small bag, said my goodbyes to the people who had inadvertently saved me, and walked out of the front doors of that care home. I didn't look back. The sun felt warm on my face, a feeling I hadn't truly appreciated in years. I was not the broken man who had entered that place. I was rebuilt, stronger and more whole than ever before. My first act as a free man was a quiet one. Through a lawyer, I made an offer on a familiar house. My old house. The offer was well above market value, an amount my children couldn't possibly refuse. They sold it quickly, greedy and unsuspecting, never knowing the identity of the buyer. In a day, the final papers were signed. I went back. I stood on the porch, the key feeling heavy and real in my hand. I walked through the empty rooms, the ghosts of the past no longer haunting me. I was reclaiming my life, not just the property. It wasn't long before they came. My children. They had heard that the house was sold, and then heard through the grapevine that their long-forgotten father was somehow back. They found me standing in the garden, a place I used to tend with such care. Their faces were a mixture of shock, confusion, and a dawning, sickening realization. We saw not the frail old man they had abandoned, but someone calm, powerful, and impeccably dressed. They saw a millionaire. They started to stammer, to offer apologies wrapped in excuses. The words "we're so sorry, Dad, and we missed you" felt hollow, pathetic. They begged for forgiveness, their eyes darting around at the evidence of my newfound wealth, their minds already calculating how they might benefit. But there was no anger in my heart, no rage. I looked at them, my own flesh and blood, who had discarded me like trash, and I felt a strange sense of peace. I didn't shout. I didn't curse them or list their sins. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, letting them squirm in their discomfort. Then I spoke, my voice steady and clear. I simply said, "Thank you." They stared at me, bewildered. "Thank you," I repeated, "because the man I was could never have become the man I am today without you. Your betrayal was the catalyst for my rebirth. You took my home, but you gave me a reason to build an empire. So thank you." I turned my back on them and walked back into my house, closing the door softly behind me. 2. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. The ultimate justice was not in destroying them, but in becoming indestructible myself. It was in the peace I found, not in a bank account, but in the knowledge that I had saved myself. I stood in my home, whole and free, a testament to the fact that sometimes the deepest betrayals can lead to the greatest triumphs. My story wasn't one of revenge, but one of redemption, and it was all my own. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more.